When I come across people that are debating whether Star Wars animation is solely for kids, those who argue against it often claim it's overly childish.
I fit perfectly.
On the other hand, those that watch it points out that it could be pretty brutal at times and more often than not include things kids might not want to see.
Failure.
But in this video I want to explore a different perspective and delve into why animated Star Wars is way more important than you think.
And I think that's what animation does best. It's the thing that it can do that live action can't do.
Star Wars is a huge universe, always filled with the potential for new stories. This is the reason for why George Lucas turned his attention towards animation in the first place, because it was an efficient way of telling adventures and expanding on characters that either didn't make it into the films or could be developed more. This began all the way back in 1985 with stories about the droids and Ewoks, not to talk about the iconic holiday special.
Follow me, friend.
While these shows could be found in the vintage collection on Disney Plus and should probably stay there, they began to showcase what animation could do by excelling in something the movies never had enough time for, and that's world building. Even the 2003 Clone Wars series that weren't the deepest or most profoundly written illustrated a totally new way of telling stories by laying most of its attention on the visuals. This show is absolutely fantastic and one of the most underrated pieces of media Star Wars has produced. I highly recommend you to watch it, if not for the story, the spectacle that it is, and the many great moments it presents.
General, are you all right?
I'm fine. Seems I've created quite the mess now, haven't I?
Yes, sir.
Like you might have understood by now, the early stages of animation forced you to watch it with a different kind of mindset compared to live action, a more forgiving one, so to speak. But in my opinion, that wouldn't last for very long. Sure, if you don't like over-the-top and childish adventures, you could skip parts of every single animated show. However, all three of the quote-unquote big series in Clone Wars, Rebels and Bad Batch has moments that, dare I say it, competes with the very best. Today it's almost 15 years since the groundbreaking Mortis trilogy premiered on Cartoon Network, but I still view it as a masterpiece, and it's not because of nostalgia. Like many creations in animation, I think these 3 episodes managed to create discussions around the Force like never before. It brought to life questions like, what does the chosen one truly mean? Or what does balance of the Force stand for? To be completely honest, I still don't fully understand these predicaments, but stories like Mortis, the Yoda arc, etc. helped me contextualize this phenomenon and actually see it for what it is.
An illusion this is. A falsehood.
This exploration of the Force is a great example of how animation manages to ponder upon topics in a more profound way by delving into origin stories and intricacies. It sheds light on facts and small elements that in the grand scheme of things seems trivial, but alongside everything else Star Wars offers, it culminates into a remarkable impact, making the universe feel so much richer in scale, complexity, and character development. For example, if you take a look at the original 3 movies, the vast universe they depict appears quite limited, but after watching Rebels, Tales of the Empire and the Bad Batch, they are seen in a completely different light. The rebellion has suddenly a deeper backstory. The rise of the Empire makes more sense, and we also see how such a massive regime like the Empire could eventually collapse.
Stand up together.
Because that's when we're strongest.
As one.
Maybe the most important reason for why Star Wars thrives in the world of animation is the creativity aspect. George always advocated that he was restricted when creating Star Wars, mostly as a result of time and money, but also because you can't do everything in live action, not even today. This is something animation to an extent takes care of, because it's not 100% realistic. It makes it possible to design whatever world you want, make your characters jump extra high and do 2 more backflips without anybody thinking twice of it. In essence, it makes the impossible possible, something that I think should be seen as an advantage in a crazy fictional universe like Star Wars, where your imagination should run wild. Star Wars Visions is a great example of how characters just flow more naturally in animation. It also gives the sense that the universe feels more alive, since details are easier and cheaper to create. Shows like Clone Wars, Bad Batch and Rebels aim for a more realistic style, especially compared to something like Visions or the 2003 Clone Wars. But once again, actors have limitations in how they move. If you compare fight scenes in Ahsoka to those in Rebels, you can see what I mean. With that, the Rebels tend to depict lightsaber moves and character behavior in battle more smoothly and fluidly. The bottom line is that the world of Star Wars just feels more natural in animation. So far, I have mostly touched on things at a surface level, but it's important to mention, without diving too deep into spoilers, that animation often has some truly amazing and mature storylines that surpasses much of what we see in live action. People are correct when they say that animation isn't just for kids, but as I mentioned earlier, they often focus on things like brutal violence as the sole argument for it. Instead, I want to emphasize the emotional depth of character arcs, like Crosshair's story in The Bad Batch or Ahsoka's journey in Clone Wars and Rebels. These stories are just as much Star Wars as anything else, exploring themes of family betrayal and the classic struggle between good and evil. The list goes on and on.
The mission. The nightmares. Finally.
In recent years, I have no hesitation in saying that animated Star Wars has been of higher quality than the live-action content. Aside from probably Andor, nothing compares to the writing and cinematic themes in The Bad Batch and Season 7 of the Clone Wars, with even some episodes from Tales of the Jedi and the Empire series being part of the conversation. You could view it as tragic that it has turned out this way, but I think there is a lesson to learn here, and it's that you have to trust the creators. Animation doesn't have the same amount of eyes watching, and it's clear that the higher-ups, different awards, and the general public doesn't care as much about it. Ironically, I think that's why it succeeds, because the people focused solely on profit tend to leave it alone. It's not as easy to poke your nose into something you don't quite understand, and it has, as a result, stayed authentic and purposeful, rather than being derailed into the chaos of the corporate world. Whether it's the Clone Wars, Star Wars Resistance, or Young Jedi Adventures, animation plays a vital role in the future of the franchise. Today, it's often the first experience for new young fans, which is why it needs to stay relevant. We shouldn't underestimate the lasting impact these memories can have on a child, as they can stay with you for life. The Clone Wars and, to some extent, Rebels are what shaped my own memories and laid the foundation for the Star Wars fandom I've been passionate about ever since. It's something truly unique and special to experience a character growing up and facing challenges similar to yours, and to then in retrospect realize that the adventures are still talked about today. I made this video because I love Star Wars animation, and it's one of of the few things I have always come back to. It's absolutely for everyone, whether you are 10 or 50, and I truly believe that. Here you can watch another video about Star Wars animation. Thank you so much for sticking until the end, and I hope you will have a great day.